This Friday through Thursday at the River Lane, it's 3 Cheech and Chong features. First, it's the hilarious R-rated comedy Up in Smoke, followed by the second co-hit, Cheech and Chong's next movie, Rated R. Then, top off your fun-filled evening with Nice Dreams, the story of 2 enterprising young men who make an amazing amount of money selling ice cream. All for your enjoyment this week at the River Lane, showtime dusk. Come early and take advantage of special prices.
Michael's, considered Rockford's finest independent restaurant, where quality food is always prepared and served with genuine concern for your satisfaction.
You're watching Channel 17, WTVO Rockford.
The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson and Late Night with David Letterman will be seen 20 minutes from now, immediately following this NBC News special.
For 73 days, Argentine troops have been digging into the winter ground of the Falkland Islands, at first to secure their invasion and then to defend their shrinking base camp against the advancing British. As many as 700 Argentines died, as many as 200 British died, both sides preparing for the last battle for Stanley the capital, assuredly the most killing battle for both sides. Then, suddenly today, it stopped.
Falklands ceasefire, not with a bang but a whimper. Here is NBC News correspondent John Hart.
Good evening. The war for the Falkland Islands has stopped. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, Eastern Daylight Time, an Argentine officer and a British officer in the capital, Stanley, agreed to stop shooting. It is a ceasefire only in fact, a de facto stop in the war with no formal agreement yet by either government. Even so, it is being seen in both countries as a kind of ending. In London, it was just before midnight when Mrs. Thatcher returned home to 10 Downing Street. There was a crowd of people there. Great Britain is great again, she told them, and they sang, Rule Britannia. In Buenos Aires, sadness and anger. There were chants on the streets, don't surrender, and some calls for the ouster of the military junta. Over the past 2.5 months, thousands of Argentines have rallied and cheered the war effort. Tonight, the crowds numbered in the hundreds. It is not at all clear what will happen next. We're going to talk about that now with NBC News correspondent Robert Hager in London and George Lewis in Buenos Aires. First of all, George, the British talk about surrender and victory tonight. How will the junta present this to the people of Argentina?
Well, so far they have not talked about a defeat here in Argentina. They talked merely about a ceasefire. And I think the junta is meeting tonight trying to figure out the best way of presenting this to the Argentine public. It seems that the British also are going to give the Argentines some room for an honorable withdrawal, as it's being put in some quarters here. The number of people out on the streets calling for the ouster of the junta is relatively small. I think that the main feeling here tonight is a feeling of shock and sadness. The full impact of this hasn't set in yet. And the junta is going to be working very hard to try to rally the nation to say that we're still going to work for sovereignty over the island. Maybe the military phase of this has ended, but now the diplomatic phase will go on. We'll continue pressing our case in international forums.
From the Argentine point of view, George, what does Britain have to do now?
Britain has to sit down across a negotiating table in terms of how the Argentines think and negotiate their way out of the islands. That's going to be very tough, however, because those islands have become very precious territory with a lot of lives lost on both sides.
Are there any contacts yet that you know of between the two governments, either through third parties or otherwise?
No, none that we know of yet, John. So far, only the military commanders on the scene have negotiated with each other. Sources in the foreign ministry here in Buenos Aires talk about perhaps UN mediation in this, but we've seen nothing concrete so far.
Is there any sense that you get there that despite this obvious loss by Argentina, that still Argentina has been heard in the world as it's never been heard before and is seen as it has not been seen before? Is that perhaps a way that the Argentines may accept this?
The sense I get of it is, John, that some people say that perhaps we've lost the war, but we did give it our best try. We did sacrifice lives for a good cause.
Thank you, George. Bob Hager in London, you heard George say that the Argentines expect some kind of room for maneuver from the British. Are they in a mood to give any room for honorable maneuver right now?
Not very much. The British don't even call it a ceasefire, really. They call it talks about surrender. They do say that the surrender doesn't have to be unconditional, but then when they tell you what sort of a surrender they're thinking about, it really amounts to unconditional surrender. They want the Argentinians off the island. They keep emphasizing just as quickly as possible. They want them off without their arms. So that about amounts to an unconditional surrender.
Well, under what conditions? Will they escort them out in Argentine boats? Will they allow Argentine ships to come and pick them up? Will they take them captive and drop them off? What are the specifics, if any, yet at Whitehall?
Well, I would think that they give the talks a certain amount of time, but I suspect that if the talks don't come to much fruition, that the British will become impatient, and I could see the British taking those Argentinians off. They wouldn't call them prisoners, but take them off, take them to the mainland, repatriate them, get them off the island, because that's been the British aim right along. Incidentally, I've run along, the morning papers are out here already, and that's a little idea of how the press is playing it here. I thought it was interesting that this particular paper, the Daily Mirror, which is conservative, editorializes, "We've won the war, now we must win the peace." So the British are clearly on a bit of a national high here, and it's going to be hard for the government to grant many concessions when they're talking with the Argentinians.
There's no fear that perhaps the Argentinians, after they get all the soldiers home, and the British perhaps in their own minds occupy that island, that there can be some harassment of that convoy from the mainland and perhaps another trap into escalation and hostilities or a stringing out of hostilities?
Well, there is some fear that they've got to garrison the island now. They talk about lengthening the airstrip. The British know that they're going to be responsible for the military security of the island for the immediate future. They hope eventually to get some others to vaguely have securities and so forth to make the island secure. But the British know that they've got to be there in person to keep it safe for the short-term future.
Thank you, Bob Hager. It's, of course, all this started when Argentine troops overwhelmed a British force of fewer than 100 Marines stationed in Stanley, and today it ended from that same town with an estimated 7,000 men on each side. Retired Admiral Stansfield Turner, a former director of the CIA, has been helping NBC News follow the tactics of this war, and he spoke with military affairs correspondent Richard Valeriani in Washington tonight.
Admiral Turner, why did it end with a whimper instead of a bang?
Because the Argentine general's tactics were poor, I believe. He gave up that high ground behind Port Stanley.
That is, the mounts here and there.
Right there. Once the British held that ground, they had sealed off Port Stanley from all resupply. They'd sealed the fate of that city.
Do you think that was the turning point in the war?
Yes, I believe that was the time that we could really tell the British were bound to win.
Apart from the tactics, what do you think of the Argentinians' behavior, their performance?
Well, I think you can sum it up that the Argentinian army performed very poorly in all cases. The Argentinian Navy perhaps even worse. The Argentinian Air Force was quite credible. What it lacked, and what could have turned the tide of this whole war, was the ability to sustain its attacks on the British fleet. It apparently didn't have the maintenance and spare parts and that kind of support.
Do you think the British could have wrapped this up more quickly?
I think so. It's hard to tell as they were laying siege to Port Stanley and whether they were holding off because they needed to bring up more supplies and troops. But I really think they held off because there was so much diplomacy going on in Europe. Mr. Reagan was over there. I don't think it's a coincidence that the attack on Port Stanley came about 2 hours after he landed at Andrews Air Force Base.
Do you think the war will now go on?
No, I think that the British will extract a total ceasefire as a term for letting the Argentines get their people out of Port Stanley. And I doubt that the Argentines will be ready to start it again. But the British will have to prepare for it.
Thank you.
It may be tempting tonight to see this ceasefire de facto and not secured by formal agreement as the end of the war and the beginnings of settlement by negotiation. It isn't quite that simple. That when we come back.
Who won?
Don't ask.
What are you eating?
Sunflower seeds.
Sunflower seeds. Do you know about Sunlight cooking oil?
No. Yes.
Sunlight's made from 100% sunflower seed oil.
So?
So it's lower in saturated fats than all the leading oils, with no cholesterol.
And it tastes great.
Well, that I know.
Sunlight. All natural from the seed of the sunflower.
Extra cleaning power?
Yes. Now Fantastic cleans tough dirt better than ever.
Nick, I liked it the way it was. Extra cleaning power and Fantastic? I liked it the way it was.
But now it's better.
But we
Look.
like...
Fantastic with extra cleaning power is tougher than ever on grease and grime.
Nick's right. Fantastic is better than ever.
Fantastic with extra cleaning power cleans tough dirt better than ever.
I didn't think it could be any better.
I figured once ought to be enough to fix any car problem. I don't have time to keep going back and back and back.
Hi. Didn't I see you in here the other day with a bad case of pre-ignition? Problem?
Nope. Liked your work, Mr. Goodwrench. Brought my wife's car in for an oil change and filters.
Mr. Goodwrench has genuine GM parts available, and GM-trained mechanics pledged to fix your GM car right the first time.
Keep that great GM feeling.
Mr. Goodwrench makes me want to come back.
With genuine GM parts.
Mary, you can't go out. You've got an exam tomorrow. Don't worry, I'm going to practice French tonight. But you're using Close-Up to stay home and study? Sure, Close-Up has real mouthwash for fresh breath. Uh-huh. And special whiteners to get my teeth their whitest. But you need fluoride, my dear. Close-Up now has fluoride. Fluoride? Oh. Here's new improved Close-Up. And voila, Pierre.
Bonsoir. New improved Close-Up. Whiter teeth, fresh breath, and now fluoride.
With the fighting in the Falklands stopped, both sides have a problem. How to make those islands, whether they're eventually called Falklands or Malvinas, just some islands once again, without more war, without unacceptable political costs at home. To talk about that, we have Professor Roger Fisher, director of the Negotiation Project at Harvard. First of all, Professor, will there be negotiations, and if so, how do you think they would go?
Well, both sides have to recognize that they need a decision from the other side. Britain can hold the islands, but they cannot end the conflict without an Argentine decision to permit them to end the conflict. Argentina can go on bombing the islands for years, and perhaps will do so. On the other hand, Argentina can't prevail without getting a British decision. Each side is reacting to the other. They've got to start thinking more about making it easy for the other side to make a decision.
Now, you've been in touch with people from both sides today. What is your sense of the attitudes tonight?
I think that the Argentine government is looking forward to a protracted war of sinking British ships at times in place of their own choosing and going on. It's easier for Galtieri to stay in office if he just keeps the war going. He can divert attention from internal problems. He can say fight on. And he's confident that whether it's 1 year or 10, Britain will get fed up and give him the islands. That's the Argentine thinking as I get it. On the other hand, Britain says we've conquered the islands. We'll wait 6 months before we talk about negotiating. We want to understand. We want to repossess the islands. We want to talk with the people. They're not thinking about what the Argentine government's going to like you to do. Each side is thinking of their own problems, and that's very risky.
That's a very pessimistic point of view, it seems to me.
Yeah,
if the Argentines do press the war, will they not be inviting attacks by the British on the mainland?
What could a dictator in Argentina want more than to have Britain, with American support, bomb Argentina? That would rally everyone in the hemisphere, in the southern part of the hemisphere, to his support. It would put him back in the good graces of the OAS. He would entrench him in power. No, I think he would welcome attack on the mainland. And this is why I think Britain really ought to be more thoughtful about the choice they're making by not making a choice. They're making it easy for Argentina to keep fighting. And I think Argentina better not fight, because it'll be easier for Britain to negotiate after a few weeks than negotiate after Argentina has sunk another ship, killing British sailors, and then demanding Britain negotiate. So each side is in desperate risk of making the wrong decision, of not thinking of the other side's choice.
Isn't it possible, however, that tomorrow or the next day or the day after, when the passions and the tempers of tonight have subsided somewhat, that Britain will realize it's in her interest to not call it a victory and a surrender, and that Galtieri and the government, which is more than just Galtieri, will realize that there is more at stake here?
I hope you're right. I hope you're right. It's kind of Murphy's Law of international conflict, that if people can react, that people tend to let their goals increase as their effort does. Having lost lives, they want a greater success. Having invested a great deal, they want to get more for it. And I'm afraid that Britain is in the risk of snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, or whatever the proper reversal of that metaphor is.
Very quickly, is there a role for the United States in this pre-negotiation or negotiation period?
Yes, I think that we and the French and the others who care about this can serve up some choices that'll make it easier for both sides to postpone action. Help the Argentines postpone military action and help Britain get something going a little bit without burning their bridges, but open something up.
Thank you very much. There's been a good deal of talk during this war that the United States' standing in Latin America has been hurt by American support for Great Britain. All of the countries of Latin America expressed support for Argentina. Measurement of our standing now is not precise, but as Bernard Kalb reports, there are repairs to be done.
No one disputes that the Falkland crisis produced a setback in relations between the United States and Latin America. But the ambassador from Venezuela had some thoughts tonight on what the U.S. should do to patch things up with that continent.
Lean on the British. Lean on the British to really come to their senses. And that this display of force, this military might, which we have seen on television in vivid color day by day, cease, and that they get to a negotiating table with the Argentina. I think the U.S. must use its immense power, its immense leverage, its immense prestige to lean on the British, as you would say here in the U.S., in order that Britain understands that there can be no real peace in the South Atlantic until the question of the Malvinas is solved in a sensible, peaceful manner.
What impact has the Falkland crisis had on U.S.-Latin American relations?
Mr. Kalb, a tremendous impact. The main concern I have at this moment is that perhaps U.S. public opinion does not have the perception as to the damage that has been caused. I don't like to be theatrical, but I would say that within my lifetime, this is possibly the lowest point in U.S.-Latin American relations.
Can you use a Soviet card against the United States?
No, I don't think that the case is trying to find another sponsor, because we start from the basis that we don't want sponsors, that we want friends. We want legitimate friends. And the fact that you're in the hemisphere makes you, well, the most obvious friend.
What kind of faith do you have in the United States that they will take your advice?
Well, I do believe in enlightened self-interest. I think if the U.S. really sits down and thinks about its long-range interests in the world, it will realize that if it could reshape its relations with Argentina and with Latin America, taking an activist, constructive role in this issue from now on, much can be gained.
Altogether, the jury is still out on just how long U.S.-Latin American relations will remain damaged as a result of the Falkland crisis. Bernard Kalb, NBC News, Washington.
Two things. The differences between Great Britain and Argentina that have been expressed by a costly and bloody war remain. And two, what we know tonight is that the killing in the Falkland Islands stopped today. Good night for NBC News.
This has been an NBC News special.
Crime's impact on the innocent. For every violence, there is a victim. Saturday.
Oh, there is something else I want.
What?
Oh, Frank
do you want to do me the biggest favor?
Tomorrow on the 3 o'clock movie, William Holden stars in Breezy.
How big? Take me to see the ocean?
Atlantic or Pacific?
I've been in California for 3 months now, and I've never seen one.
Breezy, it's 4:30 in the morning.
But it's Sunday. You don't have to work.
Besides, it's too dark to see any...
Tomorrow, a middle-aged man learns to enjoy life in Breezy. Channel 17, 3 o'clock movie.
Down there, the sun would be coming up.
Yeah. And then it wouldn't be too dark to see.
But to just completely prohibit it, I think is short-sighted.
Because they fear that inflation is not a thing of the past. They're afraid that inflation will come back.
That foolishness should have already been over.
Covering the people who make the news and the places where news happens takes the best reporters. So watch Newswatch 17 for the best in news coverage and the best reporters.
Bob Schumann, Mike Robinson, Dennis Thornton,
Karen Johnston, Newswatch 17.